Let's move into media day and training camp. We have so many quotes from the team, from Malone, from Booth on any and all things Nuggets. And it's really interesting how a lot of the quotes that came out of media day were right in line with everything that everybody's been saying about the ways that at least the roster could and should improve anyway, right? So we'll get to that. I think the first thing we have to talk about is the Jamal extension. So we have some quotes from both Cal and Jamal when they were asked. They basically were like, "Yeah, the course of the negotiations were actually normal. A lot of people
Mm,
have made something about how long it took or whatever, but I think that was normal." And Jamal was like, "I was pretty confident that something would get done. Whatever, all that spin." But he said he was happy to be there. My I'll let you talk about, like, Jamal's whole
mhm.
thing a little bit more, but I just wanted to get out my favorite quote about this was from Jokic, who said, quote, "He's my partner in crime." That quote from Jokic made me realize that that extension was never not happening
Right.
because, well, for all the reasons that we thought that it would be terrible, just objectively speaking, on paper, to not just extend Jamal, like what position that would put the team in. Should he walk? Should he have to get traded? And team has no leverage, all that stuff. But Jokic clearly wants Jamal there. And if Jokic wants Jamal there, Jamal's going to be there.
Yeah. Man, what would have to happen for the
I mean,
organization to
Jamal would have to
decide?
piss off Jokic
Yeah, it's like,
to defy that, and then
yeah.
also take. So there's all of the things that are objective about like why you have to do this as the team.
Hmm.
So on top of all of those things, they were going to piss off Jokic. I don't think so.
No, it would be
You'd
crazy
have
just
to have a
thinking
good
about,
reason.
yeah, them being like Jokic. Like, I know Jamal's your dude, but like, we need to win. We need to like move off him and bring in this other option. I know you love Jamal. What do you think? And him being like, okay, fine. That scenario is so wild to think about. So it's
They'd
much
have to
like,
have a good option too. That was
yeah,
not on the
a
table.
convincing option for Jokic to feel good about for his new partner in crime, which is I don't know what that would be. So for all the speculating that we got to do and talk about all off season, it was pretty clear that it was going to happen. It was just a matter of time.
Did you want
Um,
to comment on Jamal's presser overall?
I saw some feedback, I guess if I could call it that, for Jamal, where he's short with the media. He's a little terse. He's not like going into great detail with any of his answers pretty much ever. I think he has like a warm personality overall when you see him interacting with the players and like he'll laugh
Sure,
at
yeah.
something. But
I love his smile. I wish he would smile more, but
yeah, I think people expected him to just come out at media day and be more aggressive or forthright and
they're
um
like contrite.
yeah, or just showing some type of emotion or passion for the idea that this is like this prove it season. He's supposed to be more like intense, like I know what I have to do. I know I didn't have that great of a postseason, but we're gonna be fine, and I'm gonna prove to everyone how good I am. He just was so like calm, and people were asking him questions. He was just like he didn't even look concerned about that. And I think that
Which is
worried
like
people.
it could go either way
Yeah, it
because
could.
maybe
Yeah.
people want you to show that you care a little bit more
Hmm.
given all the consternation,
Yeah.
and understandable concern that it's not just like people on the outside, like fans were like worried about him this summer. Like,
Yeah.
bro, you
Exactly.
didn't look good, But I also understand him just being like, I'm just gonna shrug everything off. It's just
Yeah.
like it kind of is what it is. And I'm not gonna spend more time. This is what the thing that was annoying me was when I saw people online spending more time being annoyed at his presser than the presser itself took. I'm like, "Are we
Yeah.
still talking about this?
Hmm.
It's over." And, he did some, like, other media day things where he was, like, being nice to, like, the Nuggets media people. They did, like, a
Hmm.
cute little short video, and he's, like, listing the teams that
That
he
was
looks
really
forward to
funny.
playing next year, all this stuff. And as long as
Yeah.
he's good with his teammates, that's what I care about the most. And clearly, he's at least good with Jokic. So
But it's like if he internalized his bad performances to the point to where he would need to prove it, then he might come out and be more explicit in addressing that. But if he's just super confident in himself and he's like, I'm Jamal Murray, like I'm shrugging off like last playoffs, like I know what I can do, he's not going to be in that same mindset that he has to prove anything. So I kind of like that he was just calm and like stoic, I would say. Like your guys' opinion's not bothering me. Your
Oh,
guys'
that's
perception
some
of me is not
positive spin
bothering
there,
me.
Will. Stoic.
Yeah. I think he's just being stoic and just like focused on what he needs to do. I don't think he's worried about trying to prove himself, but I think deep down he knows like how much is on his shoulders. Like, and based on what the other people said about his messaging to the team about like not taking this
That's
window for
true.
granted is a positive sign. I
Yeah.
think all the comments that Malone talked about and just seeing the little clips of him in practice, I mean, everything's like in the right stage at this point, I would say. So I think we're on the right track. I feel good about it. I'm not worried about his demeanor. I think he was mostly fine. I think a lot of the like criticism was overblown about how he was behaving.
All right, let's move on to the AG extension topic. So we have so much to talk about with AG. The first thing I want to say is that he was absolutely my winner of media day, and it wasn't close.
Nice.
I thought he was incredibly insightful. He was incredibly open about the situation with losing his brother this past summer. But let's start off with the extension, and then I want to get into some of his own comments. The first thing on this was Calvin Booth saying that he wanted to get a deal done. His quote was, "Hopefully, we have some productive talks and find a deal that everybody can be happy with." He called AG an integral part of what they're doing, and he said that they want to have him for a long time. And then, AG was obviously also asked about the upcoming extension. At the time um, that media day happened, it was the day before the official open window for negotiations. Now we're a few days into that, and obviously now the team is in Abu Dhabi. AG said, "quote It seems like it's moving forward in the right direction, and he's excited, hopefully, to be extended and stay with this organization." He also said that he worked on a lot of jump shots this offseason. So if I could just get your reaction to those quotes.
I love it. I liked his press conference too. He's always been someone who's super into like the mental aspect of sports and
Yeah.
making sure that you're good with what's going on so that you can be your full self when you're performing. And so going through tragedy and going through this like tough time, I'm not necessarily surprised that he has this very good mindset still and seems positive and hopeful and like he appreciates the team and he wants to be here. And so I'm pretty confident that this extension will happen. Yeah.
So the next thing that we wanted to play is a clip from Shams on Pat McAfee. So the reason I want to bring this up is that this morning I'd seen an aggregator account that the team, the Nuggets, were worried they might not get a deal done by October 21st, which is the deadline to get an extension done before the regular season starts. So that's confirmed. We didn't know if AG had that kind of deadline, similar to like I know MPJ definitely does, but Jamal wouldn't have, and I don't know what the rules are on like which players, you can extend into the season versus have to get it done before the season starts. And that the team was concerned that they'd lose him in free agency due to his market, which freaked the hell out of me because it felt like a redux of the reports that we got early in the off season that in retrospect were expectation setting for KCP is going to be out of here, right? Where the team was worried, about his market and like all this stuff, right?
Yep.
Um, like I said, we don't have the screenshot because they didn't take it before the aggregator deleted their tweet. So I actually want to play the clip of Shams that they were citing when they made those statements.
This is a costly franchise. They just gave Jamal Murray a massive $209 million extension. He is part of the long-term future. We know Nikola Jokic is part of the long-term future. But there's at somewhat of a crossroads. They've got so much money invested in this team. One guy that needs an extension as well right now, Aaron Gordon. He's eligible for a 4-year, $150+ million extension. They need to pay him. They know it. but there are some salary restrictions moving forward in the years to come. And if they can't get there with an extension with him, you look into free agency next year with a player option, he's going to be coveted by any team with cap space. So that is a worry for Denver right now before the start of the regular season.
Right. So Shams says they have to pay him. They know it. That's an important quote from here. And he also says he's going to be coveted by any team with cap space, if he goes into free agency next summer. So not quite what the aggregator said. It's not really, doesn't sound like it came from the team. It actually sounds like it might be a leverage play from his agent, from AG's agent, which, is also concerning because I'm like, why aren't we just paying him? And I know why. It's because theoretically they could still stay under the second apron if they get him to agree to a certain number, at least for that first year. I don't know what the team is trying to do in terms of the number. While it is concerning that the deal is not done yet, I will worry more after Abu Dhabi, right? They waited until after the Olympics to get Jamal's deal done. Maybe they're waiting until after the Abu Dhabi trip to get AG deal done. I hope that's. I would be annoyed if I were the agent too, because it's like you want to get that deal done as soon as possible and not, risk anything. But what do you think about the state of the extension talks right now?
I'm pretty positive on it. I think, like you kind of said, when there were like little tidbits or morsels, if you will, coming out about KCP leading up to that, and everyone was talking about it. Like if you listen to Locked On Nuggets and listen to Matt or listen to anyone kind of around the team, they're like, look, like they know that KCP is going to be getting a ton of offers, and like just that fact alone is not good, because it was like, he wasn't extended, his contract's going to be up, he's going to get a bunch of offers. You look at the Nuggets financial situation, that's going to be tough to then work out. So there's a chance that he's going to be gone. I'm not hearing any of that.
Although the number was very different than even I thought based on those initial reports. Like I was like, if another team's going to snap him up for an unreasonable number, it's going to be way higher than it ultimately ended up being.
Yeah, the number was arguably like doable, but I'm not like a media member, but like just from what people are talking about around in Nuggets circles, you're not hearing like any little warning signs. Sure. And so if you're reading the tea leaves, and I think in these situations, more stuff comes out than normal. So that's like what you want to hear. And usually I feel like something happens when that's what a player is saying.
All right, let's get to just a couple more clips on why AG is awesome. The first one is on thinking of his teammates as his brothers.
Without getting too much into it, I always leaned on my brother. And sometimes the relationships that I had outside of my own family were not as deep. And now that I understand that you can't take any relationship for granted. These guys have been there for me every step of the way. They came to his service, they came to his funeral, and these guys have been like really, really like super supportive for me, and love them for that. These guys have really developed into people that I would call my own brother. These are my brothers.
So yeah, AG is literally like the best person on earth, apparently.
Yeah.
Right. Oh my gosh, that was emotional, and like really deep. He was talking about just not taking relationships for granted. That really, hit me. And can you imagine being in that situation where you lose your brother? He obviously has his nephews that now rely on him more as well. And then his thought process is, not just to not take relationships for granted, but to get even closer to, his teammates and see them more as brothers. And, it was nice to hear that everybody went to the funeral and everything like that. Just made me get in my feels about the Nuggets again as a team.
Yeah. It seems like when bad things happen to, like, whether it's Mike's brothers or Aaron Gordon's brothers, the team always seems to respond really well. They seem very tight knit, and it seems like a perfect environment for someone going through intense grief to like get support. Like, you got to lean on your support system. Nothing better than like an amazing team. So
And okay, let's go to one last clip of AG's about what inspires him. And I thought this was a really important answer that tells you everything you need to know about what his worth is to this team and why they should extend him at whatever number immediately.
Winning inspires me. Winning inspires me for sure. And then what really inspires me is my people, my partners, my team, my brothers, and when the days that are hard, that's what gets me out of bed. I think Nikola Jokic is probably going to go down as one of the best to ever play the game. So, working my tail off, working my ass off, so he can maximize his time in the NBA. Same thing with Russ. I think he's going to be a Hall of Famer too. So doing whatever I can to try and get him a ring, and just holding up my end of the bargain. So at the end of the day, these guys win too. And I think that's what really inspires me.
I mean, okay, the continuation of his teammates as his brothers, obviously wanting to win for them. But most importantly for me was that he is clearly in the bag for the Jokic agenda. It's not, he doesn't come out and say it, but I think it's heavily implied by talking about wanting to help Jokic maximize his time. He's trying to stack things up on that resume.
Yeah.
So if Jokic is as all in on the Jokic agenda as I am, and he wants to do everything to help him win and help Russ get a ring too, like, what else can you possibly want?
Honestly, the Russ aspect was what jumps out at me a lot. Thinking about MPJ and AG and them going through this, like we've been talking about, they're going to relate more to each other and have each other's backs. So like going through, family problems. So everyone has issues. But like to have Russ there and kind of like bring, like everyone talks about the energy with Russ and like the leadership, because even though they enjoy the team and they want to have this routine and, get back to playing basketball, like Russ is going to make it seem novel again and like excite everybody.
Yeah.
It's like the new Ish Smith and the new Jeff Green to like get them their ring.
Right.
So
I mean,
like,
last year we had Justin Holiday, but he already had a ring from his Warriors time.
yeah, it's not like they didn't want to win for Justin, but I think Russ is just, gonna
No,
add.
I was actually joking about this, how we needed some ringless vets on this
Mhm.
team to help motivate these guys.
Yeah.
And we didn't have that last year.
And like Russ, I don't know if we're going to talk about this later or whatever, but like he in his interviews was talking about like leadership isn't just, being like vocal on the court. It's about like getting to actually know everyone and their families and like where they're from and their background. And he's like, I'm getting there. Like I'm learning about the young guys. That is going to be amazing for people who have personal battles that they're working through. So
Good
I
point.
think that Russ paired with like what the team's going through is like a perfect match. Even if it's like basketball fit, we're going to see how this works out.
Yeah, actually, we could move on to a bunch of the Russ comments. I just had one more thing to say from AG's presser. So he was asked about lessons from losing last year, and he wants the team to, quote, run through the tape. This just goes along with what we were saying, the starters running out of gas, and you hate that excuse, right, in Game 7. And he also said he didn't like the team's focus coming out of Game 7 halftime, which is, like, interesting. That's such a, like, specific thing to point to. And so he's like, you can tell he's like still thinking about all of these little things. And he feels like clearly from that running through the tape analogy that the team, took their foot off the gas and like thought you could see it in that Game 6, right? Like they thought once they went up 3-2 in that series, they're like, okay, fine, we did it. But it's like, no, you have to put that team away. And you didn't do that. Didn't do your jobs. So I think that that's going to be a really interesting perspective that he's going to have. He was asked in training camp during one of the shorter media sessions after practice about the mindset of the team coming into this year after losing. And he just said, we like to be hunters. Unprompted. No more of this hunted thing. I'm kind of sick of it.
Yeah.
But he did say that. And so it's going to be interesting to see if the team is able to, maintain that through the full season. But let's actually talk about all of the Russ quotes because we have a ton from Media Day. So Malone, when asked about Russ, he just said different energy, intensity, competitive spirit. He said, quote, he has that I'm going to get in your shit type of defense. That he cited the how on the Clippers he could close defensively and be like on the other team's best player kind of thing. I hope that that's not what we resort to this season. But you could see how Russ's energy matches what Malone would want. Let me just go through what Cal and Russ and some of the younger guys said, and then I'll get your reaction to everything on the other side. So Cal said that when they were going after Russ, kind of refuted the implication that Jokic was the driving force, I guess, behind getting Russ. He said, quote, it was a collaboration between myself, Michael Malone, and Josh to go after Russell Westbrook, to kind of like paint a picture of like Nicola's not meddling, damage control on the GM accusations. But also talked about how Russ is going to bring energy, athleticism, and he said that he might shoot better than expected, but we'll get to this later. He later groups Russ with a bunch of non-shooters on the team, so I don't know how much he even believes that statement. And then the young guys got to talk about it a bit. CB talked about the tenacity and how the energy switch up as soon as he came in for even pickup before media day happened. It was evident the energy that he brings to the floor. And to your leadership point, Russell Westbrook talked about leadership as the trait that he enjoys the most about being in the NBA, both on and off the floor, as you alluded to, and that his role was going to be to get into the paint and play make.
We have this tweet from Swipa here who has the quote, and it's Russell Westbrook talking. He said, my job's to be able to push Jamal to be the best he can be and play at the highest level he can. He's an unbelievable player, and he still has so much room to get better in a lot of areas, and I'm grateful to be able to be here and help him along that journey and vice versa. So, yeah, I mean, that's what you want to hear. I don't think Jamal, thinking back to maybe his early seasons, was playing with more vet point guards. But he hasn't really been around someone who's had as much success at this position as Russ, even if they're stylistically different players. I think it's just like good. Calvin even said after the season, Jamal maybe needs to look at some other successful point guards. He referenced championship winning point guards, which Russ hasn't done, obviously. But, he's someone
Russ
who played
has gone to the finals, though. He's played as many games as the team that won the title that year.
Right. But I think this is just a positive thing that both players can help motivate each other. I think Jamal Murray likes that. I think he likes, being pushed by his teammates, I would say. If Russell Westbrook's going into the Lakers or the Nuggets, they have LeBron, AD, Kawhi, James Harden, like these big name people who are used to the lights always being on them. Jokic is a very subdued superstar. Jamal is, for the most part, pretty subdued superstar in the Denver market. There's not a lot of people like Russell Westbrook, even at this stage of career, who comes through Denver. So I think the idea that he is bringing this energy, this unexplainable energy when he's in the practice facility is
it
a real thing.
unexplainable, or is it just
well, Malone's it's hard to explain, but it's just you can feel the energy's different with Russ here. And it's just I get that because, we don't get these types of players in Denver a lot. So I think it's
true.
Real.
I think that any other team would say the same thing, though, because it sounds a lot like what the Clippers were saying when Russ first got there too, right? That was a team that was sorely needing some try-hard energy, some we need to beat up on the Wizards on a Tuesday in January energy, and Russ brought it. And this team, I don't necessarily think we need try-hard energy, although sometimes that would be helpful too. But that was something that we talked about this in our season expectations tiers, but I think the Clippers are going to miss that particular aspect just because that team was sorely lacking in it specifically before Russ got there, and that was something that he did, add. And, hopefully it's something that he adds to our team too. Everybody seems to think so. We have even more quotes here. One of them was from DeAndre Jordan on Media Day, but he also had quotes from during training camp as well, where he talked about how, Russ is going to push Jamal and he thinks they already have a really great relationship. It kind of reminds me, like with Jamal, we have all um, the stories about how his dad used to push him when he was younger. And I'm like, oh, is Russ going to be Roger Murray's proxy on the court, just getting in Jamal's face and pushing him? Maybe that's what Jamal just needs, somebody in his face.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
let's talk about the fifth starter comments because it is related to this, to Russ in particular. First things, just right off the bat, Malone said that the fifth starter job is between Christian Brown and Julian Strawther for starting shooting guard. Russ was not in that conversation at all. So that put any rumors from the outside about the Nuggets say he's coming off the bench now, but Russ, he, he can get, his ego can, get in the way and he might want to start all this stuff. Those conversations have been shut down right off the bat. And I thought that was really important. And I didn't expect him to necessarily shut anybody out from that conversation. But Russ was out, and so was Peyton. What were your thoughts on Malone really narrowing the window on the starting shooting guard position between Christian and Julian?
That was not something I expected. I knew he was going to say that everything's earned. He's always said that his whole career. So, the idea that either that someone was going to have to win the starting job wasn't surprising, but I was surprised that he named specific people instead of just leaving it open to who that's going to be. Because P-Watt, maybe they just don't plan to play him at 2 that much, but didn't they say something like that at one point? I don't remember, but
so Malone first mentions Christian and Julian, and then at the end of that statement he cites some of the things that Peyton does well and that he'll also be able to help us, but it was not in the context of he's in the competition in the running for starting shooting guard. And I think that was interesting because I was thinking that it was really going to be between Christian and Peyton had an outside chance. Julian would be in the conversation, but I don't really think he has got a shot. And really, even despite Malone's comments, I think that Christian's probably the front runner for this. We have comments from the players during training camp talking about how they really like playing with Christian and all that. Not that they don't like playing with Julian, right? But when they were asked about playing with the two guys in fit, it kind of goes along with Malone's next comments about who's going to win that starting spot. And he said that it's not about stats. It's going to be about who will complement the starters more. And that both Christian and Julian will get a chance. So that he was basically reiterating that those are the two that are in the running, not really anybody else. And I thought that was interesting. Malone also said that the goal is a top 3 defense this year after being top 8. And I was like, well, that's interesting. I think losing KCP does hurt that a bit, even if you make it Christian in the starting lineup. I think that kind of lends itself to Christian being the starter also, because we're going to get to talk about Julian's defense a little bit more. I think Christian's what that starting lineup needs. I will say, let me give some more quotes from Malone about Peyton just to round out the picture, because it's not like he's out of the rotation or anything. Malone talked about how Peyton is going to have to be an all of the above type player in terms of his improvement, the shooting, the slashing, the defending, which is already really, really good, right? Specifically offense, he said that he wants Peyton to get better at playing the dunker and attacking the rim. He wants him to live at the foul line because he can, in terms of just improving his slashing and being more aggressive off the catch. And that the goal for the 3-point shooting is to be 35% or better from 3. And then defensively, he actually talked about Peyton's existing versatility, even if he didn't improve at all on that end, which I still think that he can. He talked about how Peyton is a player that could guard Steph one night, KD another, and then Kat maybe at night after that. Well, I don't want to see too much of that. Do you have any thoughts on just those additional comments from Malone on Peyton?
I think it's what we all expect. He has to be more versatile on offense, more reliable shooter, and keep honing in the defense. I mean, even AG, when they asked him about what advice would you give to like anyone who's stepping into the starting role, he said defense first. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I mean, Julian's like you would plug him in there because he has this like offensive upside. CB and Piwad are more the defensive locks. Although I think Julian, as we'll talk about later, has like defensive attributes. I always thought this was more for CB, like the whole competition thing is to like motivate him. But
Yeah.
now I'm like, actually, this is like good for Julian, like because we need
No,
him,
I think yeah,
you
I think
know.
it's
So
both. I think it's good for both. Yeah, I think I played around when I was making some fake lineups for the season with Peyton in that starting spot over Christian. I think the energy he brings off I think it hurts the bench more, but I would like to see him eventually transition into like getting more starter minutes for sure. Calvin had some comments on Peyton Watson's mental maturity and professionalism.
I think Peyton's a very talented young player. The sky's the limit for the kid, so to speak. But I'd like to see a little bit more mental maturity and professionalism, and I think he's been growing in that manner as we go. But when he's locked in, there was a point stretch in the middle of the year last year where I thought he's absolutely about to take off. And, I think him handling those moments and still working and still staying focused and actually taking that step is probably the thing I'm monitoring the most.
I thought that those comments were very interesting and specific. Obviously, he thinks that Peyton could have ridden the momentum that he'd had in the middle of last season some more if he had and been able to take that next step, been in the playoff rotation more perhaps. Like we talked about it. Like he was really on fire in the middle of last season. And then after the All-Star break, and it kind of started a little bit before the All-Star break, kind of early February. Like, I don't know if it was effectively rookie wall type stuff because he was a redshirt rookie his first year or what it was. But clearly Calvin, like Piwat's his guy, right? Like he's the highest upside prospect that Calvin has drafted. And he cares about Peyton and wants Peyton to succeed. So I don't think that these were like negative comments necessarily. But I tend to believe them because it seems like Cal is like pushing Peyton. And if he's making this critique, like I believe it even more because Peyton is Cal's guy, right? What did you think when you first heard this?
we're not necessarily surprised that Calvin Booth is honest and straightforward, maybe to a
Right.
fault. And I think my initial reaction was trying not to react negatively to it, like, oh, he's saying that he's not mature or professional. So this is a bad
Because he
sign.
immediately says he's been improving in that regard.
Yeah, he's been improving. He said he thought he was going to take off. He said the sky's the limit, so he's like backing him. But P. Watt seems super mature in his interviews. He seems very professional. He's talked about how he's like paying attention to Jokic's routine. And so my take was more like you can fake mental maturity and professionalism. You can go through the motions of it as a young player, but eventually like that has to grow over time. It's not just something that
Right.
can just come to you.
And the work has to keep up. Like he seems to be like relatively mature. He's still really young. Like I need to double check this. Is Peyton the youngest player on the team? He is tied with Julian and Duran. They're all 22. Oh no, Trey is 21. So
I think it's just a natural thing that like it takes multiple seasons and experience to get to a true like mental level and professionalism that they'll like gonna make you successful. And even Jokic said with CB, the only thing he thinks he should work on is decision making. So I don't know if it's that cerebral aspect of basketball that plays into that too, like on the court.
yeah.
But I think it's just something you got to do over time. It can't be like rushed necessarily. So
Right. I think that it's good that Calvin acknowledges that effectively the reason that Peyton wasn't in the full playoff rotation is because of how he performed it wasn't just down the stretch of the season. Like I said, it started early February, March, most of April, right? That's the end of the regular season. Compared to how he'd been in like the middle of the regular season. Like that's the difference between good and great players is consistency. We talked about this with Jamal as well, right? So, we hope the same things from Peyton, whatever it is that he needs to do. And it's unfortunate. We actually got the news that he has a strained hamstring, so he's going to be out for probably most of the preseason. It sounds like they're probably going to try to sit him until the regular season starts, from all the comments, just to be cautious. Similar to what happened with Christian Brown in preseason last year, I imagine, right? I don't know if Christian played at all in preseason last year, but if he did, he didn't play after he hurt his ankle. But then he was right there on opening night. So it doesn't sound like they're too worried about it. It sounds like it's just going to be cautious. That's just unfortunate that he's not going to be able to show off what he's been working on earlier in the preseason, but obviously hoping for a speedy recovery from him. Let's actually talk a little bit about Dario Saric and his role with the team, because we didn't really talk about him a ton this summer. He's thought of as like he's going to be the Jokic off the bench, all of this stuff. And that's pretty much how the team thinks of him. Cal says he can shoot, he can play make, he can rebound. The defense is a question. That was the quote from Calvin. But he said Peyton can help with rim protection. He said that he can play with or without Yoke or AG, which I thought was interesting because Malone had similar comments about Dario being able to play backup 5 or backup 4 and playing with Nicola at times. I'm saying it like Malone now, Nicola at times, and even with DeAndre Jordan, which is like interesting to say that because Zeke exists. But yeah, what do you think about that prospect and how they're thinking about Dario as this like 4.5 and what those minutes playing next to Jokic might look like?
I mean, I think if they're playing him at 5, it's got to be that stretch 5 and that more idiosyncratic 5 that Jokic is, where it's like it's not the typical center role. Yeah. Because I think Dario fans and people who follow him know he's not the typical 5. So, if that's what it is, then that's great. I like it just because.
Have we even had a typical 5 since like Mason Plumlee?
Nah, I mean, not unless you count DJ, which we don't really play that much. So, like him not being able to play without Jokic and AG, I think is like that's why you bring him in, like because we want those dudes to like rest and have a capable like passer and playmaker that's not Jokic and AG, right?
I wouldn't mind having AG in the backup 4, not backup 4 minutes, but playing the 4 next to Dario. Like that was one of the things that I played around with a lot when I was, again, making hypothetical lineups for the season, is I always wanted to have at least one of Peyton, AG, or Vlatko next to Saric. And I don't think that Vlatko alone is really enough. Just to have somebody there to complement Dario defensively, and let Dario take over a lot of those, that offensive hub work. But then you think about like who's the point guard in those minutes? Are those like Jamal minutes? Are they Russ minutes, etc.? I think that's going to be really interesting. Dario, is interesting to hear him talk about how he hangs out with Jokic actually when his teams have been in town in Denver. And he talked about being able to play with Yoke or DJ as a stretch 4, or playing in the dunker spot. Bless you. But also as a 5. And he said I could, try to play the Joker role. And I thought that his comments were really interesting because he really emphasized his versatility, and that coming in large part because he likes to really be aware of like who else is on the floor and like, okay, what role am I playing like right now, this minute? Instead of just kind of being like one track mind for like a stretch of time. Like he's really, I think, vigilant in that sense. And that's really something you want from your veteran, who you hope is going to be some kind of anchor in the good way for that second unit.
He is super versatile, and I think can be played with a lot of different types of players. I am a little worried that like his success is totally dependent on his 3-point shot.
I don't think that's true though. I think he's versatile, and it would be very helpful for us if the 3-point shot worked. When you talk about his success, I think he can work in lineups without the 3-point shot like going down. The fact that he's taking them in the first place and giving offensive rebound opportunities. Let's say if he's playing with Zeke, he was also on that list when I said playing him next to like one of AG, P. Watt, or Vlatko. Zeke also, he could take over the offensive rebounding, duties. And, for as bad as a defensive rebounder as Zeke is, he is actually a decent offensive rebounder. So
Mm-hmm.
if Dario's missing threes, maybe Zeke could, clean up, and let's see if he can actually put them back in the hoop. But I'm just like, we can talk about the shooting comments. Can we actually just play really quickly the clip of AG raving about Dario?
I'm so excited to play with Dario. He's a hell of a talent. So versatile, does a multitude of things on the floor, can pass the ball, can shoot the ball, can score the ball, can defend, can play big, can play small. He's a huge contribution to this team. I don't think you guys understand how big of an impact that he will have on this team, playing that backup center and playing that backup four, and he's going to be fighting for minutes, and he's going to be fighting and scrapping for minutes, and you guys are going to see, I think, his playing time increase throughout the year.
Yeah, so incredibly complimentary of Dario. Like, his face kind of lit up when he got the question about him in a way I didn't necessarily expect, which is another aspect of why I think AG won Media Day for me. He's been glowing ever since he got here about how much he loves playing with Jokic. So I think it might just be like, he used to play with Vooch in Orlando before the Magic traded Vooch to the Bulls, right? Maybe that's just like a thing. He's like, I love playing with like a big who can pass and like do things on offense, and I can like play that complementary role as opposed to like being like the guy as he was for stretches in Orlando as well. So I thought that was interesting. AG also talking about Dario playing both the 4 and the 5 role too. So clearly the team sees him at multiple levels as being more versatile than just playing the backup 5. So maybe the Saric heads will be, satisfied by this.
Yeah.
You had a question about the shooting for Dario in particular, but let's actually talk about some of the comments that the team had on the 3-point shooting. Calvin Booth had a lot of very interesting comments about the shooting on the team. He said, quote, we are riding a fine line with the shooting on our roster, right? And then he specifically cited having, like, it's specifically tricky when you have AG, Russ, and P-Watt in your rotation. So that was bringing Russ into that. I was like, oh, okay, your previous comments about how Russ might shoot better than you think is like, but is it going to be better than you think?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like that with all of them, right? P1 and AG.
He talked about the shooting as something to monitor, and even suggested it might be something they'd be willing to address at the deadline, though I don't know how they would. I don't know. The only assets that they have available are far off first round picks. So just getting like a quote unquote shooter, like, I have questions about like how they would approach doing that. Especially when you have to consider like trading guys. But then he also talked about how this team doesn't necessarily need to shoot as much as some of the other really high volume 3-point shooting teams anyway. He said Nikola Jokic is better than everybody in the world. Why do the same thing they can do, the better 3-point shooting teams, and make it random, right? Where you like leave it up to variance. Talked about Jokic's floater and also MPJ's mid-range game. I thought these were really interesting comments from him because as critical as I can be about Calvin Booth, everything that he said in this last part was right in line with my thinking about the team. You don't need to be a high volume 3-point shooting team, but even he thinks they're riding a fine line, where it's like, okay, could we not be 30th again? Like the championship season, I believe they were 22nd in 3-point frequency as opposed to 30th like they were last year. What do you think about that?
No, it was super interesting, and it reminds me of us talking about Jokic's 3-point shot in the Olympics and arguing about like how important that is. And it like goes, I'm more like on your side now listening to Booth, because it's like,
oh, so now that Calvin Booth has said it.
He makes a good point though, where it's like, you don't like, why go away from exactly. Well, I'm giving you credit. Yeah, just like why play into the hands of your opponent when you should be doing what you are strongest at? I mean, didn't he cite like we had a pretty low 3-point frequency when we won the title too. It's like we just like
Right,
play our brand of
22nd.
basketball.
It's not even
Yeah.
top half of the league, but
And like he referenced ways like if Mike just added one or Jamal added one
So-
or Yoke added
so
one.
that was actually from Malone.
Oh, that
said
was
that.
Malone. Yeah. Okay.
And the other comment that Malone made on the shooting was like, let's try to get 35, 36 threes up per game as long as they're the right types of threes. My thing with the number, like, I don't like looking at 3-point attempts because the Nuggets are such a low pace team. Like, we don't have as many possessions per game. But if Malone said something like, let's get up to, 22nd in 3-point frequency as opposed to 30th, like they were, that's probably like equivalent what he's talking about here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But he also was trying to downplay it more. Malone was trying to argue that we had enough shooting on the roster while Calvin thinks they're riding a fine line. And Malone was like, I think they think similarly though about like how many more threes do they need to take per game. He's like not worried about it, which is why he said like if Mike, Jamal, and Jokic each took one more three per game, then we'd be 15th, which is like even more than the championship season. Obviously, Peyton talked about working on his shooting over the summer. I think a lot of players were asked about the shooting, right? Shooting was a big point of emphasis for him. He talked about doing a lot of reps and how he was working on reducing the dip on his shot. He's like, I have naturally long arms, so I just tend to dip the ball more, but I'm working on not doing that so that it improves the accuracy. He thinks his form is pretty, so that's, good. But he also talked about wanting to turn transition baskets into guaranteed 2 points. So that kind of goes in line with what Malone was saying about how he wants Peyton to slash more and live at the free throw line. He said that Peyton said that he wanted to guarantee 2 points, want it to be a bucket or free throws. I'd like him to make more free throws as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, I think so. What are your overall thoughts on the state of the 3-point shooting of the team?
I think Booth is right where it's something to be monitoring. And I think it's a legitimate like concern. Not that like it's the most important thing because like we've already said, it's not necessarily the style we need to win, but you do need spacing. I think it just plays into the overall philosophy though, and will hopefully take care of itself a little bit where it's like, without KCP, that's more opportunities for Mike. That's what Mike said. Hopefully that's true.
That is what Mike said. Mike also talked about emphasizing his working on his mid-range game.
Mike needs to trust what he's good at. He was like, oh yeah, someone told me my mid-range stats were really good, so I guess I could go to that more. It's like, yeah, no shit, Mike. Like you're really good. You're a good 3-point shooter.
To trust it, he has to know it in the first place. So it's interesting that he didn't even know this. We were talking about it in the middle of the season.
Yeah, like how crazy his stats were from there. And like it's like KCP had that little go-to like mid-range handoff jumper at the elbow. Like now Mike could do that. You know what I mean? Like to kind of stop
more
to get a score or like stop a bleeding. If like the other team's going on their run, he can get a nice like mid-range shot and make it. P-Watt, if P-Watt and CB are improving their 3-point shot, if Jamal's like maybe hunting it a little bit more, I think it'll all work itself out. But that is like something to consider because even like thinking about the Celtics matchup with their high volume of threes, that was like the whole like the math problem. They could beat the Nuggets just simply by that. So it's like you may have to, depending on what the matchup is or in the playoffs, be able to go to that if you need it, but don't like go totally out of your comfort zone. But we are looking to like be more versatile on offense. And I think running plays for like Julian and MPJ and players who can shoot the three well is going to be like important.
You talked about how Malone mentioned some comments that Jamal had made to the team, to illustrate like his leadership and his interactions with the team and all of that. But Jamal actually said too, he was asked about Malone's comments. And he said that he told the young guys that this year is a new opportunity and not to take it for granted and that it doesn't happen everywhere. I thought that was really powerful because it demonstrated just an understanding of how good this team is and has been, right? Last year, they made it so that they were the only team over, it was 6 years in a row that made the playoffs in the Western Conference. That hadn't been done. And I'm pretty sure they're going to make the playoffs again this year, knock on fake wood here. You're not always going to be on a good team. You're not always going to be on a team that is competing for a championship. And that's what this team is. And I really appreciated not just his comment here, like telling the media about it, but obviously talking to the team about it. I thought that was very interesting. He also said that Christian and Julian are winners, and that they're both not afraid to speak up in huddles and like call things out that, mistakes the team is making, or like things that they need to do better on possession by possession. This was on media day. So he's referencing things that, Christian's doing as a second-year player and that Julian's doing as a first-year player last year. And I thought that was really, insightful about the young players. The other thing from Malone here is that he's been pushing for an overseas preseason trip for a while. So for all the complaints we have about Abu Dhabi and how it shortens their off season and, this, that, and the other, he thinks it builds camaraderie. And when you think about it, last year, the two teams that had the Abu Dhabi trip were the Mavs and the Wolves, and they ended up in the Western Conference Finals.
Wow.
Right. So for all it takes out of your preseason, that trip maybe adds some as well.
The Nuggets were burnt out a little bit after winning the title, and they need some fresh juice and energy, which they're going to get with Russ. They're going to get with this trip. Pretty good vibes coming into the season, so I'm excited.
Yeah, better vibes. As long as they get that AG extension done. Let's talk about the comments on the team's championship window, which were largely from Booth and Malone, just to round out the comments on media day and training camp. So, Calvin Booth was very clear that the team, he views them as being halfway through a 10-year championship window that started when they got AG, right? And obviously we have some playoffs that were taken away from that because of Jamal's injury. They won the title year. Last year they didn't win. Now they're in year 5, or they're almost halfway through the 10-year window that Booth is envisioning. And he said, quote, "Every shot counts." He said we probably have 5 more single shots and every shot counts. That's another thing that actually leads me to believe that they want to extend AG and should be willing to go into the second apron in order to do so, right? If you really think like this is it, like this is the window, this is the time to go all in, put all your chips in. But he also said that they have an obligation to both win and develop. So doubling down on that strategy. I thought it was interesting that he said they have 9 real guys that would be in everybody's rotation in the NBA. And then we have Zeke and Vlatko also. So that tells me that the 5 guys are the core 4: Christian, Peyton, Julian, Russ, Dario. And that's the 9, right? And then Malone was asked about the clash between the coaching staff and the front office, and he talked about how if they're always agreeing, then that's not good. More damage control, more spin. But as long as they're communicating, collaborating, and challenging each other, then things can be positive for the team. But he also expressed gratitude for the trust that they've had in him and all of this stuff, which is like, yes, imbue them with the qualities that you want them to have.
Yeah.
Right? Malone is really good at this.
Mm-hmm.
He even addressed the stuff with the second apron, which I thought was interesting. He said, quote, "Teams are letting great players walk because they don't want to approach that really dirty word of second apron."
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that comment actually contradicts what we've heard about AG's extension so far, where it seems like it's generally moving in the direction of that Malone, is he worried about them letting AG go? Is he only referencing KCP? And I think he might have specifically called out Paul George.
I don't know.
I can't remember if he named it, but I think he did when he made that comment.
Could be. I thought it was mostly about KCP and just like, this is what it was. Because I bet you he was pissed that they let KCP go. And he even said, like, I had to like familiarize myself with what the second apron
Right.
was and what this, to understand. Because I'm sure he was
Why
like,
they were
what?
letting
We're not
KCP
letting
go.
KCP go. What are you talking about? And Calvin's like, dude, like, we have to, for whether you disagree. I'm sure that, that had something to do with it. So
Malone saying I had to familiarize myself with it was like, oh, I can imagine what those conversations were like, where it's like Calvin Booth in the front office just being like, this is the new CBA. And Malone being like, I don't give a flying fuck. you
mhm.
know?
Yeah.
I just want good players on my team. I thought that was interesting. All of these comments seem to point towards they're trying to win now, right? Especially Booth's comments. I do think that it's a little bit of a shift in tone from last year, where he was from Calvin, where he's talking about more on the development side and how like he talked about last year as like not a gap year, but like if they won one, they'd be stealing it.
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
man.
but now he's talking about every shot counts. I think that's a definite shift in tone from last year.
Yeah, I think that was my biggest, like, takeaway, honestly, from the whole thing was that comment. Like, I was, like, surprised by that. Malone was still on the, like, whole Spurs analogy thing and how, like, the Spurs never repeated, but they were a dynasty.
Yeah.
But now Booth is not on that, or he was, like, winning's really hard.
He's like, we've got 5 more tries.
I don't know if Mike Singer got in there and was like, hey, enough with that dynasty talk. Like, just say winning's hard and then no one will give you shit. And now he's on that train and kind of covering his ass kind of thing. But that was an interesting one. I don't know that I love that because he seems super confident. Like, we have Nikola. Like, we're going to, I'm super confident. We're going to be contending every year. Now he's like, oh, I don't know if we'll win one again. I don't know. I don't love that.
You're talking about Malone?
Booth saying like, oh, it's so hard to win one.
It felt like of two minds, right? He's like, I don't know if we'll win again. Winning is hard, but he also talked about how we've got 5 shots left and every shot counts.
Yeah, it's weird. I don't know. His messaging's a little weird, but overall, I would say the like awareness of the team's issues from Malone and Booth seemed on point.
Yeah,
and I'm sure that they have their own perspectives on all the team's issues, but it seems like they're aware, like they're not in the dark.
Right.
So.
And Jamal didn't say this specifically, but again, he made those previous comments that we just talked about when he was asked about Malone saying that he had talked to the team. The way that Malone put it was that Jamal told the team that they have a championship window, like quote unquote championship window, and not to take it for granted. So
Yeah.
I think like everybody is aware of the window now, right? AG's talking about Jokic's legacy, even though he's not using the word, right? Jamal's talking to the team about not taking the window for granted. Calvin Booth is talking about they have 5 shots left and every shot counts. Malone is always trying to win, so we know that. We didn't talk about this, but Christian and Peyton and Julian, I believe, all talked about how the young guys had talked about wanting to win a championship this year. And, of course, they're going to say that, but it's nice that they said that, right? I think that that's important for everybody to kind of know what's at stake and, treat it with that gravity. And obviously Russ is going to bring that as well.
If you're watching, please subscribe. We're trying to get to at least 1,000 subs as quickly as possible. So please subscribe if you're listening. Hit the like button as well. That helps us immensely. Follow us on Twitter and hit the notification bell on YouTube so that you can see all our show announcements as well as on our clip channel on YouTube. And remember, winning is fun and losing sucks.
Let's stop losing.